Just wanted to do a little video about Spectrum services. So I had Spectrum for about 3 years in Missoula, Montana. And because Montana is like a different region than where the majority of Spectrum runs, there would be this big disconnect between like the main Spectrum hub and then like the boonies, which Montana apparently is in the Spectrum world. And not only that, like it's just when I would talk to one person at Spectrum, it was a different thing entirely with another person at Spectrum. So I had this whole confusing thing happen when I was disconnecting my service in November. It's now December. Anyway, so I called to say, hey, I want to schedule a disconnect, for the end of the month. And so I was scheduled for a disconnect, and I didn't realize they would disconnect it like right that second. And that was my fault. I should have asked, okay, can we make the disconnect, on the 29th or something like that. So this is the first time I kind of had been disconnecting internet service because I'd just been, I don't know, like I just hadn't, it'd been like maybe 10 years since I disconnected service like completely. If then, I don't even know if I've ever disconnected service. Anyway. And even before this process, when I had moved, taking what I thought was my Spectrum account, every time they were changing it, like I had a business account and they would give me they gave me a residence account that I didn't figure out, moved again, and it was this other account. And the thing is with Spectrum, they don't remove the addresses that you've had. So every time you're calling, they're confused. They had 3 different addresses that they weren't updating. I had a website that I had created, which was no longer valid, and they were getting my websites confused, even though the one didn't exist anymore. And I just assumed, oh, you're not using the address I had from 3 years ago. No, they're still using the address I had from 3 years ago. So it's just like Spectrum is so incompetent. I'm sure there's some people who do their job right, but it's just torture being a client of Spectrum when you're in Montana, and maybe it's better elsewhere. The thing is, telecom doesn't have to treat you right. I've had Verizon's been horrible, AT&T's been horrible. They don't have to treat you like a human being because they have power and we're at their mercy. So anyway, so I am told just return your router, and that means your account is closed. So after all the hullabaloo I went through to reverse the disconnection that I did, and I was like, okay, I just want to disconnect it, for the 30th of November. Anyway, so I got the router returned, and I get a message today, so it's like December 16th, I get a message I have a bill that's due. So apparently returning the router doesn't mean that I've disconnected my service. Apparently my previous request for disconnect, it didn't happen. And I'm sure people at Spectrum or other sympathetic people to these folks are going to say, well, but I mean, I don't have time to chase them down to make people do their job. And I know there's people who think I should do people's jobs for them. And I just want to let people know, if you're moving to Montana, don't use Spectrum. There's Blackfeet Communications, which is like double the price, but they probably know what they're doing. They're probably a better company. It was just when I was talking to the customer service person, they're like, what can we do to make you stay? And why would you want to ever leave Spectrum? And then I'm put on hold for 2 minutes while somehow they have to do some extended process to somehow flip a switch. I'm sure he didn't need 2 minutes to have me on hold. I think it's like part of this psychological abuse that these kind of companies do. But anyways, he comes back and he insisted that he had to put me on hold because he had 2 million customers. you know, if Spectrum has 2 million customers and they got one customer service person, or what, 10 customer service, I mean, it's like they're a government organization. But what Spectrum needs to do then is hire more people. Hire people. If Americans aren't going to do the job, hire somebody else. But it's not the customer's fault. It's not my job to manage the Spectrum employees. So, anyways, go private. I should have done it, and it's just really expensive. It's like, that's the dilemma. But if you can afford Blackfeet Communications, I would do things like that. Just avoid Spectrum. Thanks for watching.